Right, so my sort of earliest memories, not so much fishing, but I've always been obsessed with sort of nature and animals and things like that. So from a very young age, I used to go over the railway line. I used to catch lizards and snakes and slow worms, take them home and keep them in the shed. And my dad was terrified to go in his shed because he never knew what was going to be in there. And it was always, the thing with me is I always wanted to have a closer look at things, always wanted to pick things up, always wanted to touch things. And when we moved to a council estate, there was a lake at the bottom of that estate. Obviously they were fishing it, and I started walking around there, and like I say, I was very, very young, sort of 5, 6, 7. Started wandering around it, and I could see the fish, and it was the same thing again. I wanted to pick them up. I wanted to know what they looked like out of water. So my fishing really all started there. You know, it was the only way I could get them out of the water, to have a closer look at them. So everything stemmed from there. My uncle, at the same time, he owned a farm, and my dad used to take me up there with my little walrus rod, my little float rod and a pint of maggots, and we used to catch roach and perch in there. We used to catch anything that come along, and I remember we used to have a baby bath, fill it with water, and what we caught we used to put in there. And my uncle had loads of feral cats on the farm, so you used to end up batting the cats away all day because they were trying to get in the baby bath and nick the fish. So it sort of, everything progressed from that. And on that same lake, obviously there were carp in there, and sometimes you'd be float fishing in a little hole in the weed, and every now and again you'd see it was almost like the fish parted as a carp come ghosted through, and they were just like this mythical beast. They were probably only 5 or 6 pound, not big fish, but to see one come ghosting through, it was just amazing. And then same thing again, I want to see what that looks like out of the water. I want to catch that. So my dad got me there was a couple of Sundridge rods, I think they were, and some Seal Star bait runners. And there was an old boy who lived at the top of the estate, Alf Barden, and he used to sell fishing gear, and I got a couple of optonics off of him. So it all stemmed from that one little lake. That little lake's got a lot to answer for. So that's where my sort of journey began into all of this. I'm down on one of my syndicate waters. It's a small, intimate water. It's kind of, there's 4 main sections, and they're all sort of divided by little channels and reed beds, and so it's really sort of a nice little intimate water. As I said, it's about 4 acres, and realistically there's 5 good fish, 6 good fish that you're going at. 3 commons in particular that are sort of mid 40 plus, up to the biggest that one's been out is 49. So there's some good fish to go at. Now, I've been on this syndicate for about a year now. I've done maybe 20 nights maybe so far, because I've been fishing other places as well. But I just want to talk you through sort of my swim choice, why I've chosen this swim, and explain a little bit about how I go about it. The honest answer to why I've chosen this swim is because I was here last week and I found a nice spot out there. The fish showed me where the spot was, and I did really well. I managed 5 bites last week. The spot, it's a little bit different to where people would normally fish, I guess. The way I like to look at things is I'll come into a swim and I'll look at the obvious areas. There's a bay over there on the far side, like a little reedy bay. And the way I view it is that that's probably an area that's quite popular, that a lot of people are going to fish. And there's another bay right over there, over by the tree, underneath a little oak tree, I think it is. And that again looks like a really obvious area. There's a nice reed line that runs down that margin. Yeah, again, it looks like a nice area. And the way I view it is I think that that's probably where a lot of people fish. Those 3 areas are probably where a lot of people fish. So what I tend to do is put a red cross through those areas, and then I start looking for somewhere else, somewhere that I'm fairly confident that nobody else has been fishing. To do that, I use a marker. Some people call it a carp scarer. I wouldn't go fishing without one. I can literally run a marker through 3 or 4 times. I know what's in front of me. I know where I want to be fishing. I see people leading, for want of a better word, 30 casts sometimes, and I think, well, just run a marker through there, you know, it's not a carp scarer, it's just a feature finder. And what I've actually found out there is it's almost like a little bowl, so it shallows down from the margins and then it drops away, it gets deeper, and then it comes up onto a plateau, and just beyond that spot there's like a little ledge that drops down about 12 inches, so I'm literally in the middle of a bowl and I'm fishing all 3 rods in that bowl. What sort of gave me that area in the first place was the fish last week. I was watching them, there's loads of little channels here, and they were coming through the channels, and rather than hugging the margins and going around the margins, they were making a beeline straight across the lake. So they were they weren't really mooching about, they weren't stopping, they were just travelling from one area to another, and there's lots of little areas like that. So what I decided was to that spot actually fell exactly in an area that they were passing back and forth over. So baited it, put all 3 rods on it, put about 3 kilos of crushed and whole boilies over it, and yeah, five bites during the night and into the morning. So it worked. So that's basically the reason why I've come back into this swim. A lot of fish in the area this morning, melted away a little bit now, but generally, I mean, we've chosen the right day for it. This is the hottest day of the year so far. So I'm not really expecting anything to happen during the day, but I am expecting something to happen through the night and especially early in the morning. So hopefully we'll have a fish to show you by the morning. Yeah, so who are my angling influences? When I was really young and just starting off, there was a lad who lived on the estate, and he was a few years older than me, probably 4 or 5 years older than me, and he was a punk rocker. And everyone was a bit scared of him, but he was a really good angler, and I used to sit behind him and watch. Never used to speak to him, was always a bit scared to speak to him, but just used to sit behind him and watch. And then one day he turned around and he said to me, "Don't you ever get bored?" And we got chatting. And he was the first person that showed me that you could target specific species. I was probably only 12, 13, maybe 14. And he used to specifically target tench, fish for roach, fish for pike, fish for rudd. And he was the one that showed me that you could target a specific species. I can remember him showing me how to catch rudd off the surface with casters, and showing me pike fishing, how to catch pike. So he was sort of the first person that showed me that you can target a specific species. And sort of as I got more and more into carp angling, I mean, there were a lot of influences. You know, when you fish with a lot of good anglers on a lake, you can't help but be influenced by them. You know, you'll see people doing things, and every now and again, even now, you see something sometimes and you think, I could do something with that. And you don't, I'm not going to say you copy it, but you adapt it to your style of angling. You know, people like, I mean, I fish with Rob Marsh a lot. He's been an influence. Adam Honeysett, he's an influence. Ed Bettridge, Lewis Reed, even my old mate Chum Lee. Every now and again you'll see him do something, you think, oh, that's I can do something with that. But I guess the biggest influence, and he won't thank me for saying it, I'm sure, but the biggest influence on me would be Lee Merritt. He was showing me things 20 odd years ago that I still use in my angling now. He was one of the first guys. He was critically balancing baits, and this is going back over 20 years ago. And when I say critically balancing baits, he'd sit there with a bucket and he would pinch little pinches of putty off until it was almost, well, it was basically neutral buoyancy. It used to sink so slowly, it would take about 30 seconds to hit the bottom. And using that rig with supple braided hook link, it was devastating. It still is now devastating. One suck and it just flies so far back into the mouth. So yeah, Lee would probably be my biggest influence in carp fishing, certainly. Right, so these days I only really use 2 rigs. The cotton rig, which I've already done a video on showing, and the other rig that I use is a D rig. I've not invented it, I'm not going to pretend I've invented it. It's just a D rig, and I'm going to show you how I tie it now. So I start off with ultra skin, 25 pound ultra skin. The reason I use ultra skin, it's a coated braid, but it's quite supple, so it sort of takes on the contours of the lake a little bit better than a stiffer material would. So I'll take off about 15 inches of it, I suppose, just to start. Now, what I then do is a size 6 incisor hook. So straight through the back of the hook, and you want that tag quite long because that tag is going to form your D. So I whip it quite a long way up the shank. I want the D to be formed sort of where the point of the hook is, so in line with the point of the hook. So I do whip it quite a long way up, and then back through the eye of the hook, like so. So there's your hook on, and then you've got your tag, which is going to form your D. Just straighten that up so it's flush with the shank of the hook, like so. What you then do, pop on a flexi hook swivel onto the tag end. So that's on your tag, and then your tag end, that goes back through the eye of the hook as well. This is the tricky bit. Pull that down. There she goes. So that is going to form your D, like so. So you take off any excess, snip that down, and just blob it with a lighter, and that stops the D from pulling back through the eye of the hook. There she goes. So that won't come back through now. And there's your D. Next trick, I like a little bit of a supple hinge, so I strip back about 1 inch of the coating. Gives you that extra bit of movement, so the hook can move a little freer. Right, so the next thing you do is you thread on a hook liner, pull that down to the eye of the hook, and what you want to do is just push that over your knot, over the eye of the hook and over the knot. A little bit fiddly. Like so. And that is your finished article there. So you've got your D with a hook liner over the top of it. A little bit of supple movement where you've split the braid. All you do then, swivel, and I like to tie about 8 inches, I'd have said, and just a simple overhand loop knot, which again gives plenty of movement at that end as well, at the swivel end as well. It's just a simple overhand double loop knot. Wet it down. Set the tag off. And there's your finished rig. And all I do then is just add a couple of blobs of putty, little mouse dropping size blobs of putty just to pin that down. And there is your finished rig. Finished off with a 10mm essential cell pop-up. I only use small baits these days, I only use 10mm, so obviously the hook bait's going to match the hatch. I trim off a little bit of the top of it first before I put it on. I like it critically balanced. This way I can pinch off little bits of it as I go until I get it balanced exactly right. Going back to what I was saying about Lee earlier, it's one of the things he showed me 20 years ago, properly critically balancing a bait. And that's what I do until I get it sitting exactly right. We're going to show you how it sits very shortly. It's also the reason why I use a covert dark incisor hook, because it's front heavy. So what I'm actually trying to achieve is that the eye of the hook and the point of the hook are laying on the bottom, but the hook's actually in an upright position, so almost like a claw, rather than it laying down flat, which is not what I'm really looking for. I want it to be sat like that, so it's almost like it's cocked and ready to go. So yeah, we'll show you exactly what it looks like in the water. Right, okay guys, so this is why I use a 10mm pop-up. I shave the top of it off first before I put it on, and this way I can pinch bits off of it until it's balanced out exactly as I like it. As I said before guys, this is something that Lee was showing me sort of over 20 years ago. If I just drop this in the water, I can show you exactly how I want the hook to look. So what you actually get is the pop-ups up above the hook, but rather than the hook laying flat on the bottom, I want the hook in an upright position with both the eye and the point of the hook both on the lake bed. So literally it's like a claw, and it's almost like in a cocked position, just ready to go all the time. So that's the presentation that I'm looking for. One of the questions that people quite often ask me is, how do I fit my fishing in around a work and family life? And the honest answer, the brutally honest answer, is I don't. I fit my work and my family life in around my fishing. Fishing's an obsession for me. It's like a way of life. It always has been. I'm very fortunate. My wife's very understanding. We've been married, I think it's 28 years this year. Been together since she was 17, I was 22, and she's never really known any different, because it's always been like that. And she's got no issues. She never questions it. She's got no problem with me going. You know, one of the few questions she asks me is on a Sunday. She'll say, "What days are you fishing this week?" And that's just how it is. You know, work life. I'm a train driver. I work 4 days a week, and I swap my shifts around. I do permanent early, so I'm up at sort of 3 o'clock most days in the morning. The plus side to that is that I'm finished by midday, so the rest of the day is mine. I'm home, grab the dog, I'm out the door, and I'm off around the pond somewhere. You know, not necessarily always fishing, but always looking. I just love it. I just enjoy being outdoors. Grab the dog and off I go. To be fair, I'm a lot better than I used to be. Many years ago, if I was on fish, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go to work. I'd just stay there. I missed loads of things. I missed funerals, weddings, birthdays, all sorts of things because I was fishing. Work was the same. I used to ring up. Sorry, I'm not coming in today. I'm not very well, because I was on fish. But I think as I've got older, I've definitely sort of mellowed a little bit. It's still an obsession. It's still a way of life. but I can now I'm able to step back a little bit and say, no, I've got to go and do this, I've got to be there, I've got to do it, rather than going, no, I'm not going anywhere. But yeah, luckily, I've got a very understanding family, and they don't mind, they've got no problem with it, so it's good. Memorable captures, I guess there's a couple. The big brace for Wellington Country Park's got to be right up there. At the time it was classed as a British record brace. It was the most bizarre trip. I took my good pal Rob Marsh with me for a guestie, and one of the stipulations at the time on Welly was if you had a guestie there to fish next to you or in the next swim to you. So I'd put Rob in one of my favourite swims, which is the Snags, and next door is a swim called Daisies that looks out across the bay, and I'd never fished Daisies before. It wasn't really a popular swim, but because I wanted Rob to catch one, and I'd put him in Snags, so I fished Daisies, and I had a little plumb around, and there's a broken bar that drops right the way down through the bay. So I put a rod on that, and then around to the left, there's a little island, and I'd put a rod on that and then one out in open water. And sort of that evening, as we were settling in, we'd had something to eat, and it was probably about 10 o'clock in the evening, and I had an absolute one toner off the broken bar, and after I knew it was a heavy fish, you could feel it was a big fish, and in the net she went, looked down, and it was the ulcer fish, and she was massive. It was a new PB, 58 pound 12 ounces, which was just mind-blowing, to catch a new PB. Rob was there as well. A little while later, Rob caught his first Wellington Country Park as well, out of the Snags, a common, mid-30 common. But then some time later, this is where things got a little bit like a carry-on film. I had a take on the island rods, or I had a take on the island rod, but I didn't realise it was the island rod, because what had happened, I was backleading. It's kind of Daisies, it's almost like a beach swim. It gradually goes down, and the geese kept walking across in front of me, and they were wiping me out. So what I'd done is I'd put backleads on, slid backleads down to pin everything down so the geese wouldn't keep picking me up. And unbeknownst to me, the rod that was round on the island, which was sort of at a right angle to me, I'd slid the backlead down. But what I'd actually done is I'd slid the backlead into a bunch of brambles that were under the water. So the actual take came on my middle rods. And I'm playing it, and Rob's behind me, and I'm saying, "This don't feel right." And Rob's going, no, there's something not right about that. Anyway, all of a sudden a rig pops up with line going through it. So I've gone, I've got a trailer. Rob's going, and so I've weighed it out, put my waders on, weighed it out, I've got the line, and I'm pulling the line. And I said to Rob, "That looks like my line." He's like, "Right." And we're sort of looking at each other, and I can feel a big heavy weight on the end. I said to Rob, "Pick that other rod up," the rod that was going around to the island. So he's picked it up, wound down, and sure enough, it's locked up in these brambles. And what had happened is, because the backlead had gone in the brambles, the fish couldn't take any line. So it had kited round, picked up my middle rods, and that's what had given me the bite. So now we're trying to get the backlead out of the brambles. While this is going on, the line's parted. So I've now got it wrapped around my hand. So I'm playing this fish, hand lining this fish, and I'm out there for about 10 minutes hand lining a fish. Still not knowing what fish it was. Anyway, it pops up, and Rob's thrown me the landing net, and it pops up, and I recognise it straight away. And it's a fish known as Little Bighead, and it's another one of the big uns. And I'm hand lining it, and it's roaring off, and I've stepped back, and I've handed the line to Rob and said to him, "Look, if it goes, I need to be able to feed some line out, so just take as much slack up as you can, and if I need it, just feed the line back to me." And we were out there for about 20 minutes like this, just me handlining it, handlining it. In the end, I bundled it into the net, and we both sort of looked at each other and just went, how the hell did I do that? And it was just this surreal moment. And on the scale, she went 56.4, I think it was on the scales. So really, I should never have caught that fish. You know, it was just, when luck's on your side, it was meant to be, I guess. And at the time, it was a brace of 114 pound an ounces. So at the time, it was classed as a British record brace. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but it was. So that's definitely right up there with one of my most memorable catches. And I guess the other one would be a more recent one, and it would be a fish known as the Almost. It's memorable for several reasons, really. It's a fish, I joined that syndicate to catch that fish, and it had been very elusive. I'd caught nearly all the other fish in the pond apart from that one, and I was beginning to wonder if I was actually ever going to catch it. And it was another sort of, when your name's on it, your name's on it. And I'd not long turned up, and there was one other guy fishing over the other corner, Joe, and Gary was in the swim that I wanted to get in. So I've gone round, had a cup of tea with Joe, blah, blah, blah. Gary's packed up, I'm the only person on the lake. And as I'm setting up, I saw a fish top over near the island, and I'd literally got a rod in my hand. I just threw a lead into the rings, felt it down, boom, landed nicely, great. So I'm sinking the fluorocarbon. I've put the rod down, clipped the bobbin on, and it's pulled out my hand. I thought, try it again, clipped it, pulled out my hand. Took me a minute or two. I thought, I've been picked up by a pike. There was a lot of pike activity at the time. They'd not long finished spawning, so the pike were patrolling up and down the margins a lot, and it wasn't unusual to get picked up by a pike. So I've wound down, thinking it was a pike, gingerly, to try and not cut myself off. And it started kiting. The line started cutting through the water and cutting round to my right. I thought, oh, it's a fish, it's a carp. So I'm playing this fish, not really thinking too much about it. It felt like a good fish. I've been playing it for about 10 minutes, and all of a sudden, this head just popped up and sunk back down again. And it was, the way I can describe it, the Almost has got like little teddy bear eyes. And I saw those eyes as the head come up, and my legs just went to jelly. I was like, oh my God, it's it. So then, you know, I've started to play it even more gingerly. Eventually got it in the net. Unbelievably, it went in the net, and as I slackened off, the hook fell out. So it was another one of those situations where it was, your name's on it, you know. That was a special fish. That's, I believe personally, I mean, it's 45 pound, it's almost a lever. And I personally believe it's going to become one of the most sought after fish around. I can see it becoming, because of its shape, its size, and the fact that it's almost a lever, it's potential to be a really iconic fish, I believe. Not only that, it was also my 70th UK 40 pounder, so that was a special one, definitely. So yeah, that's my two most memorable captures. Last night was looking good for a bite. Put a bit of bait out, got the rods exactly where I wanted them, and was getting some liners through the night. Unfortunately, and predictably, as we were saying yesterday, it was the hottest day of the year, and at about 5 o'clock this morning, the fish started spawning. So you can't fish for a spawning fish. So it was rods in, cutting our session short. We have covered quite a bit, which I hope you find something useful. I hope you enjoy it. The good thing is, the owners very kindly have given us permission to come back later in the year and do a part 2. So hopefully we can come back maybe early autumn sort of time, and with a bit of luck we'll be able to bag one for you and show you exactly what this lovely lake holds. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again next time.